Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Mike Evans. I am your host this morning. And we have been going over the past few days on a whirlwind tour of the administrative agencies and how they are essentially decimating our republic. We're going to continue with that today because of the fact that there is so much information out there, and you folks need to really understand the true implications of an administrative agency, what they do, how they operate, how they are extra or outside the Constitution, and what they're doing to our nation. Furthermore, you need to understand what we can do to cease and desist from that activity and break the chain of administrative access into our society, essentially. Before we go there, and on this morning's bullet points, I want to read something to you that is critically important. Patrick Henry, a young attorney, rode into a small town in Culpeper, Virginia, in March of 1775. He was totally shocked by what he saw. There in the middle of the town square was a minister tied to a whipping post. His back had been laid bare, and it was bloody, with bones of his ribs showing. He had been scourged mercilessly with whips laced with metal. Patrick Henry is quoted as saying, "When they stopped beating him, I could see the bones of his rib cage. I turned to someone and asked what the man had done to deserve such a beating as this. The reply from the man was that the minister was being scourged because he had refused to take a license. He was one of 12 who were locked in jail because they had refused to accept or apply for a license to preach. A license, of course, becomes an arbitrary control by government that makes a crime out of what ordinarily would not be a crime. It turns a right into a privilege." 3 days later, that minister was beaten and scourged to death. This is the specific incident which sparked attorney Patrick Henry to write the famous words which later became a rallying cry of the American Revolution. What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. I ask each of you to go look that particular story up and that quote up from Patrick Henry, and let those words seep into your soul and into your spirit and into your mind and into your heart. Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. America, we are at the pinnacle. We are at the top of the mountain. We must make a decision. Will we descend on the left, or will we descend on the right? One side of this mountain is full of cliffs and pitfalls. That side of the mountain harbors almost sure death. The other side of this mountain has a graceful slope and verdant fields beneath. And there is water and food on the way down, and there is peace in that valley. America, which side of this mountain will you descend into? I pray to God that each and every one of us is aware and awake and will recognize the side of the mountain that is safety and security and liberty and freedom, not for ourselves only, but for those who come after us. Okay. I want to continue on this issue of these administrative agencies, because the administrative actions that are followed by these agencies on a day in and day out basis, they are such a violation of the Fourth Amendment that these agencies have the power of inquisition. And if you recall our discussion yesterday, that was a Supreme Court ruling, not my words. This is the words of a Supreme Court ruling in the United States versus Morton Salt. These agencies have the power of inquisition. They can investigate merely on suspicion that a law is being violated, or even just because they want assurance that it is not. The Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, if you can bring the power of inquisition with the authority to, quote, investigate merely on suspicion that a law is being violated, or even just because they want assurance that it is not, and you can fit that model into the Fourth Amendment I just read you, you have extraordinary imaginary powers, and you should be an author of fiction. The Fourth Amendment doesn't just specify that the protection that's involved in the Fourth Amendment applies to criminal action, right? I mean, we're not saying here that this is only for criminals. This is for the innocent, too. Let me clarify something for you, which was a statement that was made by Madison. And this is the phrase that is the overarching cry of our government today. Crisis is the rallying cry of the tyrant. Crisis is the rallying cry of the tyrant. And we hear administrative agencies and this administration and the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense. Everyone screams, crisis, crisis, crisis. Fiscal crisis, military crisis, crisis of war, crisis of poverty, crisis of immigrants. Crisis is the rallying cry of the tyrant. Please make sure that you visit our website, americasvoicenow.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. When you find us on Facebook, there are stories that are posted every day. I want you to go out there and I want you to find ones that you think are valuable and share them with friends and other people on your own page. Share those links. They're invaluable in educating those around us. We'll be right back.
I know what you're thinking, punk. You're thinking, did he fire 6 shots or only 5?
Dirty Harry gets all his ammo from the battery station. John Rambo, you You guessed it. He gets his ammo from the battery station, too. So if you need ammo, go to the place where the guys who know about ammunition go, the battery station. They have one of the largest supplies of ammunition in the area. So make sure you're stocked up and don't get low on shells. Go to the battery station at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains.
The New York Times recently did a story on preppers. The story concluded that prepping was very rational behavior. Preppers are doctors, lawyers, teachers, builders, and plumbers, people just like you. At Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance, we specialize in the products and knowledge to provide your own safety net for troubled times. Isn't it time you joined your Ozarks neighbors who are already working toward independence? That's Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance, 3225 Highway 62 East in Mountain Home, 870-492-4030.
Make sure that you see our friends over at Pizza Hut. They have a great lunch special. They have a salad bar and pizza open bar. It's a buffet style. They're available from about 11 o'clock in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. Great place to eat. You can get something good and healthy and something tasty at the same visit. Tuesday nights are family nights where kids eat free. Encourage you to support those folks. They support us. Also, make sure that you see our friend Mary over at Chantilly's Artisan Bakery. Mary is a great friend and a staunch supporter of this program and your and my liberty. And she is at number 2 Evans Arcade off the square in West Plains. And her telephone number is 255-2253. You know, the Fourth Amendment, according to the Supreme Court, applies to inspections, searches, and seizures by administrative agencies. They don't declare that right to be extra-constitutional. But it doesn't apply to businesses, according to the Supreme Court. It applies in your private home because there's according to the Supreme Court, a greater expectation of privacy in your home. Really? So you're trying to tell me that my liberty ends at my front stoop and doesn't extend to my business? Is that fair? Is that right? I dare think not. This erodes the protection of private property when it applies to a business and allows the Fourth Amendment and the Fifth Amendment taking clause and other constitutional protections that are afforded to not only individuals but businesses and business owners to be violated. The administrative agencies, and we've gone through the fact that they have what's called executive power. And executive power is, of course, power that is well outside the constitutional limits. It is extra-constitutional. But they also have legislative power. And that's a dangerous thing in the hands of a bureaucrat who is unaccountable. Let's put it this way. They write regulations that have the force of law. These regulations are published in something that's called the Federal Register. And after some basic procedural processes called rulemaking, they become effective. Now, the process they go through for rulemaking is generally they ask for public comment. And the problem, of course, with that is that public comment is almost always testimony from public or private or special interest groups that stand to benefit from the regulation being instituted. So after that, it becomes effective, and it's published in the Federal Register and has all the power and force of law. What does that tell you? That the constitutional process of passing laws, in other words, the consent that both the House and the Senate have to approve of a bill before it becomes law, that has been bypassed. That means we have a fourth tier of government, the administrative agency, and they are outside the scope of review, they are outside the scope of the law, and they are outside the scope of the Constitution. A bureaucrat can simply write a regulation, publish it, put out a public comment period, and then that's it. Suddenly, after that, you've got a SWAT team that, for all intents and purposes, can kick down your door and apply the rule. There was a case in the Supreme Court called United States versus Grimand, Grimand. It was in 1911. This case, this delegation of legislative power is unconstitutional. And the reason for that is Article 1, Section 1 says, all legislative power herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. Let me read that to you again. This is Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution. All legislative power herein granted, note the words, herein granted, shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. Nowhere in Article 1, Section 1 does it say a Senate and a House of Representatives and whoever else they want to pass their delegated authority to. This kind of illegitimate law was something that was recognized by John Locke. Now, Locke is L-O-C-K-E, and I encourage you to read John Locke's treatise on government. He wrote a number of them. And his second one was called, one of the best ones was the Second Treatise of Civil Government, and he wrote it back in 1690. Now, forgive the flowery language, because our language processes today are a little different. But I want you to hear this. This was his fourth point. Second Treatise of Civil Government, John Locke, 1690. Fourthly, the legislative cannot transfer the power of making law to any other hands. For it being but a delegated power from the people, they who have it cannot pass it over to others. The people alone can appoint the form of the Commonwealth, which is by constituting the legislative, and appointing in whose hands that shall be left. And when the people have said, we will submit to rules and be governed by laws made by such men, and in those forms, nobody can say other men shall make laws for them, nor can the people be bound by any laws but such as are enacted by those whom we have chosen and authorized to make laws for them. This is probably the most crucial sentence of the paragraph. The power of the legislative being derived from the people by a positive and voluntary grant and institution can be no other than what that positive grant conveyed, which being only to make laws and not to make legislators, the legislative can have no power to transfer their authority of making laws and place it in other hands. What that tells you is that we have delegated authority to Congress to make laws to make our society better, safe, proper. Congress has no authority to delegate our authority given to them to others, especially those who are unaccountable to us as the voters, us as the citizens, us as the grantors of that power. We didn't grant Congress the right to make other people legislators on their behalf. We didn't give Congress the right to say, we're going to create administrative agencies and give them legislative power so we can pass the buck on unpopular legislation. That's what they're doing. The benefit for legislators of passing these powers onto others is that they can avoid blame when these regulators pass oppressive rules. And then they can step in and curry the favor of the voter by saying, we'll save you from that horrible ruling that was passed by that terrible agency. Wow. Wow. If that's not an aha moment for you, I don't know what would be. The other side of this is that these political charlatans have the ability to gain an ideological control over these agencies. You want proof? Look at the EPA. You want proof? Look at the ATF. They have gained an ideological and instituted people to rule and run these agencies who have an ideological slant or bent. And they've gained control over these agencies. And what they do with them is they institute legislation that doesn't have a prayer of passing in a normal congressional session. Now do you understand? They can't get the law passed through Congress. So they hand it off to an unaccountable agency and say, you do it. You don't need a vote to get it by. I talked yesterday about how the EPA is instituting cap and trade. Twice it failed in Congress. So the ideologues just handed it off to the EPA and said, here, we can't get it through, you do it. And you do it in a way that no one has the authority to question. That is the reality, folks. That's what they're doing. That's why they're doing it. And I also just described to you why it's completely unconstitutional. Now, here's the worst part. We've covered executive authority, which they've declared for themselves. We've covered legislative authority because they are legislating without authority. And now we get to one of the worst areas of all, judicial power. They are instituting rules through executive authority and legislative authority. And then they have the power to judge the rules in their own court through their own administrative law judge. The word administrative law judge is a quoted word. It's an actual term they use. Here's the problem. These administrative law judges are employed by the same agency that they're expected to rule for or against. What do you think that outcome's going to be? We're going to take a break. It's the bottom half of the hour. I'm not taking calls today because I want to cover all of this ground. It's terribly and critically important you understand exactly what we're talking about here, and it is obligatory on you, once you understand the danger of where we are, to spread this word. However, wherever, whenever, no matter what, you must spread the word. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will talk about the judicial power and how the administrative agencies are usurping authority by putting their own judges in place that are extra judiciary. They're outside the normal court system, and how they're scramming and scamming us every single day. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Mike Evans. I'll be right back.
Fox News Radio. I'm Chris Foster. One woman, an employee, is still missing after a gas explosion at a restaurant in Kansas City, Missouri. At least 14 people are hurt.
There is still some search and rescue going on, but the problem is that the debris that is on the scene is too heavy for individuals. We have to get some heavy equipment in to move it.
Kansas City Mayor Sly James, cadaver dogs found nothing overnight. Construction on new homes down last month. December had been the best since mid-2008.
January building permits, a sign of future activity, came in at 925,000. The estimate there was for 915,000, and that's up 1.8% from December.
Fox Business Network's Diane Macedo. Drug overdose deaths up for an 11th straight year, most commonly from addictive painkillers, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. About 1 in 6 of the medicine deaths were from suicide. Fox News, we report, you decide.
The area's best selection of firearms, ammunition, and accessories can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry, your Class 3 dealer for automatic weapons and suppressors, including Gemtech and Huntertown, with a great selection of holsters, slings, magazines, and gun storage options. West Plains Pawn and Jewelry will also do special orders. With new arrivals every week, the area's best selection of firearms, ammunition, and accessories can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry, 1713 West U.S. Highway 160, or shop online at westplainspawn.com.
Imagine having your check deposited every month on time with no hassle and at no cost to you. Direct deposit with Community First puts your Social Security, retirement, or payroll check directly into any of your Community First accounts. It's just as safe and secure as if you made the deposit in person. Make things easy with direct deposit at Community First.
Living up to our name, Community First Banking Company.
Community First. Member FDIC.
Weather is a service of News Talk 107.1 The Point. Contact Josh or Cody at 255-2548 for more information on making weather sponsorships part of your marketing plans.
From the Point Weather Center for this morning, we expect the day to be partly sunny with a high of 35. There's a winter storm warning in effect from midnight tonight through 6 p.m. Thursday. Overnight snow is likely. It'll be cloudy on low 24 with less than a half inch of accumulation. Look for another inch of snow possible on Thursday, our high 32. I'm Rod Tanner, and for more information, visit my1071thepoint.com.
Voted number 14 on Forbes' Top 100 Most Promising Companies, Anytime Fitness in West Plains offers a wide variety of fitness equipment to maximize your health and fitness goals. We proudly offer tanning, group exercise, and online support. Whether you're looking for nutrition plans, workout programs, or the simple advice to get you to the next level of fitness, Anytime Fitness has you covered. Visit us today at 1651 Gibson Street in West Plains or 1301 Highway 62 East Mountain Home, or call us at 417-255-2555. Anytime Fitness, we're the club for busy people.
All right, we're back. I want you to get a chance to visit and assist some of our sponsors. You can get down to see the folks over at Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance. You can find them on the web at ozarkmtnselfreliance.com. You can reach them via telephone at 870-492-4030. And you can find them at 3225 Route 62, 1/2 mile east of Walmart in Mountain Home. Outstanding lineup of Self-Reliance products. Make sure you see them. Our friends over at the Battery Station at 303 Washington Avenue, right off the square in West Plains. You can find them on the web at batterystation.com. And that you can reach them via telephone at 417-257-7799. Make sure that you talk to them about the Life Straw. It is an absolute necessity for you and your family. Our friends over at West Plains Pawn and Gun. You can find them on the web at westplainspawn.com. They are on Route 160, about 1/2 mile east of Walmart, heading south, and you can reach them at 417-256-3000. They have between 400 and 500 guns available for you to look at and purchase. You can find accessories, ammunition, and all kinds of wonderful things there. So I encourage you to make sure that you get down to see our friends over at West Plains Pawn and Gun, our friends at Battery Station, and our friends at Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance. Jason from Wits End Classic Barbershop is our sponsor of our phone lines, and I'm not taking phone calls today because I want to make sure that I cover all of this information. It is so voluminous that even tomorrow, Doreen is going to join with us tomorrow. Doreen Hannes, she normally joins us on Friday. She's going to be with us tomorrow instead because on Friday we're going to have an interview with the candidate for the 8th District here in Missouri who is running for the House in Washington, and it's the Democratic candidate. So we'll have him here on Friday to kind of give us an overview of his positions and where he stands on the issues for the replacement of Joanne Emerson's seat. He's the Democratic candidate. Last week we had on Bill Slants, who was the Libertarian candidate. We're looking to get Jason Smith. He's the Republican candidate. And if the Constitution Party fields a candidate, we'll have him or her on as well. Okay. What we're talking about here, and by the way, make sure you see our friend Jason over at Wits End Classic Barbershop. He's got the best haircuts you can get for $10, and he's got a host of other great services he offers, and he's a heck of a young man. Okay, what we're talking about here is administrative agencies that have judicial power. And what that means is that they have the right, they give themselves the right, to review their own regulations and your violation of those regulations in a quasi-judicial court. What's that mean? Well, the word quasi, right, first of all, means not complete. It's partial. And it's a partial judicial organization. And essentially what that means is that these are private courts that are outside the system of the Title III and Title I courts of the United States of America. These are courts that are held to review the administrative law that these administrative law judges rule upon. And you can't carry a normal case in there. You can't sue your neighbor because his cow ate your vegetables. That's a different court. That's a real court. These are not real courts. They are kangaroo courts. And here's how you know that. First of all, in administrative law proceedings and judgings and an administrative law court, guess what you don't have? You don't have a trial by jury. Right there, ladies and gentlemen, that is the most blatant violation of the Constitution you can ask for. You don't have a trial by jury. You have a hearing by an administrative judge or an administrative law. They call them different things. But you have an administrative law hearing before someone who is not a judge, has no idea, and is not qualified to handle legal questions. All he's ruling on is, did you violate their administrative rule and regulation? And he doesn't even care that it's outside the Constitution. He or she already knows. So you have none of the constitutional protections of a trial by jury. In fact, these courts most resemble what? Military justice tribunals. That, my friends, is terrifying. These are military tribunal systems, military justice systems, that are the effective, translated another way, when you go before an administrative law judge, you are up for a court-martial. Did you hear what I just said? The rules of normal court systems don't apply. You are stripped of your constitutional rights, and you are in, effectively, a court-martial. You know what that does? This is slowly but surely, since 1946, when they created these systems, this has been interjecting something into America's society that they really desperately want. The elements of martial law, accepted by the public. Boom. Boom. They have inserted martial law into our judicial system without anyone even raising a whimper. These administrative law justices, or judges as they're called, they don't call them justices, by the way, they have extraordinary powers because they can strip you of your normal constitutional rights. You don't have a right to a trial by jury. You don't have a right to have your accuser stand in front of you and make the accusation. Your rights to defend yourself are stripped. In many cases, you're not even allowed to have an attorney represent you. They can impose fines. Then they assess other punishments. Now, the one thing they can't generally do is put you in prison, because that is a function of the true court. But they figured out a way around that too. Here's what they do. They find you guilty of violating the regulation or the rule. And then, when you don't pay the fine or toe the line, then the real court can step in and imprison you. Don't believe it? I'll prove it to you. I'm going to prove it to you right here, right now. You all know I'm a felon. I was convicted not of having a short-barreled shotgun. I was convicted for failing to pay the tax on it. A Title 26 IRS code violation. I did 3 years in a federal penitentiary for it. It wasn't the fact that I didn't pay the tax. The tax was what the administrative rule claimed I had to do. But when I didn't pay the tax, the regular court got to do their bidding and imprison me over that. Ladies and gentlemen, the ruling under which they had the power from the administrative agency called the ATF was that the secretary of the ATF declared that that particular shotgun served, and this is his quote, not mine. You can go look it up. It's ATF Rule 94-2. Had no sporting purpose. It served no sporting purpose, quote unquote. That's not my words. Those are his. The secretary declared it served no sporting purpose, and therefore it was illegal. Find me that in the Second Amendment, and I'll give you $1 million cash. And therefore, since I didn't pay the tax, I could be imprisoned. Here's what you have to recognize. And there was no opportunity for me to appeal that decision. In fact, they made it impossible to appeal. Here's the fiction of administrative law. One, these courts aren't part of the normal legal court system. They are outside the court system, and they bypass all of the protections that you get from the Bill of Rights. You're not protected by due process. You're not protected by the presumption of your innocence. You don't have a right to a trial by jury or any of the other barriers that normally protect you as a citizen in a court. In a court, you have the right to be tried by a jury of your peers. You have the right to the presumption of innocence. You have the right to a trial by jury. You have the right of due process. Due process says that if I disagree with your decision and I can prove that I'm wrong, I can take it to a higher court. Not so with an administrative court. Basically, what you've got is administrative law falls between civil court and criminal court. And it's quasi judicial. If you're in doubt about whether or not you're an administrative law court, ask this simple question. Can I have a jury? If the answer is no, you know that you're in a kangaroo court. We're going to take a break. Tomorrow, we're going to wrap this process and this study of administrative agencies up, because There's so much information. I could do 2 weeks worth of shows on this, non-stop. They are so pervasive in our system, so pervasive in our society, that they are eating our substance. Enter the term eating our substance and the word declaration in front of it in a search engine. Tell me what you find. We'll be right back.
Family Fun and Fitness, LLC presents rape and assault prevention classes at Country Cupboard in Licking, Missouri. Men, women, boys, and girls, if you want to know how to stack the deck in your favor in a situation where violence is the only answer, this class is for you. Rape and assault prevention classes are held Monday evenings at 5:30 beginning February 11th and run through March 18th. Class size is limited, so call today 417-260-1006 or register at Country Cupboard, 217 North Highway 63 in Licking.
All right, we're back. So we now know that administrative processes and procedures can imprison you. But they can. Because they're free to levy a fine against you. They can do things like utilize evidence that would not be allowed in an ordinary court. In fact, they can even prosecute you without evidence. They can bring you to a trial and rob your opportunity to defend yourself without due process protections or controls. And they can seize your property. And then they can bring criminal charges against you for failure to obey these obscure and, more often than not, contradictory regulations that they've passed. That no Congress has ever reviewed, no congressional body has ever looked at, no one has voted upon. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the definition of tyranny. Don't you get it? That's the definition of tyranny. By the way, they can impoverish you as well, because they work through the principle that they have unlimited resources. And so they simply strip you of yours and beat you via financial attrition. You can't hire an attorney to put up with all of the stuff that they deal with and they throw at you. It costs you so much money that you go bankrupt. And you lose by financial attrition. You have to go through, if you're going to fight back against an administrative agency, you got to read the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act. Because you know what it says? In order to disagree with their ruling on you, you have to go and do something called the administrative remedy. This is such a joke. When you see the rules for an administrative remedy, they're unbelievable. I'm going to show you how crazy they are. I've filed administrative remedies. And before I was allowed to actually go to a court with my case, I had to go through 3 steps of administrative remedy. It's just like going to court. They make it look the same. It wears the same clothing, and yet does not have a judge underneath. And one of the rules that they had, which I found to be incomprehensible, was this. They would respond. You would file your complaint, and they would respond. And the day your response was given to you, you had 20 days to have your response back to them and in their hands. Now, well, that's not a big deal, you say. Oh, yes, it is, and I'll tell you why. First of all, when you file in a real court, you have until, let's say the court gives you 20 days. You have until 20 days to submit it and have it postmarked. But not so an administrative agency. They say it has to be in their hands and received and stamped by the 20th day as received. Now, how can I be responsible for the mail system? And how can I be responsible for a clerk who gets it and doesn't stamp it on time? And once that stamp is not on time, they immediately deny you for failure to meet the regulation. Ladies and gentlemen, is that the fox guarding the hen house or what? And until you exhaust the administrative remedy, and that's their wording, not mine, you can't actually go to court. In fact, if you try to go to court, the court will throw it back and say, you didn't meet the administrative requirements to get to this point. Now you can go back and start over. If that's justice, folks, I'm the Pope. Basically, what's happened is that the federal government has allowed administrative agencies to become the tip of the spear for those things that they can't pass and those monetary fines that they want to grab from you. And you have almost no recourse. Administrative agencies have become an extortion racket, and an unconstitutional one at that. When I was a kid growing up, they used to have guys like that who would go around to stores, and you'd open up a brand new delicatessen or you'd open up a brand new liquor store, and these guys would come in and they'd say, hey, nice to see you. Welcome to the neighborhood. You know, this neighborhood is rough, and you need some protection when you're around here. And the store owner would say, well, I mean, this is a fairly safe neighborhood. I haven't been robbed, and I've got bars on my windows. I think I'm pretty safe. And the guy would turn around and say, no, you forgetting what you're talking to here. You need protection from us. John Locke, Washington, Jefferson, Madison. These gentlemen, these leaders, these patriots, these Americans who understood justice from tyranny, they would be appalled. They would be angry. They would be raging. You know what they'd be raging about? Not just the injustice of administrative agencies. They'd be raging because we allowed it to happen. You've heard me say many times that we, the American people, our generation, currently here right now, you listening to me, you watching me, we will go down in history as the stupidest, lamest, most apathetic generation in history. I'm going to read you something. The IRS was conceived, and they were conceived to raise revenue. That's all they were there for. And there was a guy who was the Speaker of the Virginia House at the time, Richard Byrd, and he made this quote in 1910. And you'll note, by the way, that the IRS's original purpose was not to tax individuals but businesses. There was no personal income tax. And the IRS, by the way, is an administrative agency. I'm going to have to be quick because I've got 1 or 2 minutes left. Here's what he said. And you can tell, by the way, by this statement, that he anticipated that the IRS would only be a taxation method for businesses, not individuals. Listen to his words and you'll hear it very clearly. Richard Byrd, March 3rd, 1910. A hand from Washington will be stretched out and placed upon every man's business. The eye of the federal inspector will be in every man's counting house. The law will, of necessity, have inquisitorial features. It will provide penalties. It will create a complicated machinery. Under it, businessmen will be hauled into courts distant from their homes. Heavy fines imposed by distant and unfamiliar tribunals will constantly menace the taxpayer. An army of federal inspectors, spies, and detectives will descend upon the state. They will compel men of business to show their books and disclose the secrets of their affairs. They will dictate forms of bookkeeping. They will require statements and affidavits. The IRS has the power of inquisition. They have the power of administrative law, an administrative law court. Did you know that the tax court is outside the normal court? The real constitutional court? Did you know that the bankruptcy court is an administrative law court? Ever wonder why you can't get a fair shake? James Madison wrote in the Federalist number 62, "What prudent merchant will hazard his fortune in any new branch of commerce, when he knows not but that his plans may be rendered unlawful before they can be executed? What farmer or manufacturer will lay himself out for the encouragement given to any particular cultivation or establishment, when he can have no assurance that his preparation and labors and advances will not render him a victim of an inconstant government?" No government, any more than an individual, will long be respected without being truly respectable, nor be truly respectable without possessing a certain portion of order and stability. James Madison, Federalist number 62. We have a system where administrative agencies have grown in our nation like a cancer. And they have metastasized from the tumor, and they have grown insidiously into the lungs and insidiously into the bone and the marrow of our nation. And they have grown into the muscle, and they have grown into the brain and the fabric of our nation. This is a cancer which is eating us alive. They are eating our substance daily. I'm going to leave you with this quick quote. Edmund Burke, an Englishman, born 1729, died 1797. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. We'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early. Be here. Last day of administrative agencies.
News Talk for Missouri and Arkansas. 107.1 KBMV, Birch Tree, West Plains. The Point.
Fox News Radio, I'm Dave Anthony. He took a long mental health break from Congress last year, then resigned right after he was reelected. Now Jesse Jackson Jr. is getting ready to go to court. Fox News Radio's Rich Johnson live in Washington.
The former Chicago congressman due in court later this hour to, we believe, plead guilty to conspiracy. And wife Sandra expected to admit to one count of tax fraud. Now, court papers filed last week show Jackson diverted about $750,000 from his campaign treasury and spent it on furniture, a Rolex watch, memorabilia items from rock stars and athletes. Sandra Jackson, who was a Chicago alderman until she resigned last month, has signed a deal admitting to filing a false tax return. Dave?
Rich, is a woman buried in the rubble of a blown-up restaurant in Kansas City. The search continues. Fox News Radio's Jennifer Kuiper has more live.
As dinner is served at JJ's restaurant in Kansas City, an employee smells gas and rushes people out. Then, an explosion. A utility worker in the area may have hit a gas line. Flames engulfed the restaurant. At least 14 hurt and one person, a JJ's employee, is still missing. Kansas City Mayor Sly James says they've been searching the rubble, but
the debris that is on the scene is too heavy for individuals.
So heavy equipment has been brought in. They're moving fast because a major winter storm is expected to hit Kansas City tonight. Dave?
Jennifer, disgraced former cycling champ Lance Armstrong is on deadline